chalk drawings in this area if you're running out of room. And keep having fun. I know I watch more social media than most of you, and I may be your only social media outlet that you experience in the week. There is a video that's gone around for the last little while, which I just find captivating. It is of a mother trying to convince her young son to get into the car to go to school. And I'm not sure if the young son is not wanting to go to school, period, or if the young son doesn't like his backpack. And so in the video you see the son throwing a tantrum, and then he grabs his backpack from his back and then he slams it on the ground. He's not happy about something. And you see the mom there trying to reason with the child. Who knows what approach to parenting that she's taken, but the video has become something of a showpiece for those who oppose gentle parenting, which I think has value. I don't want that to get lost in the mix here. But what you don't realize until it happens in the video is not only does this young protesting boy have a mother doing gentle parenting, he also has an older sister. And the older sister comes along, grabs her brother, hikes him up, and tosses him into the back seat. She slams the door and then picks up his backpack and throws it into the back seat, and then marches around to the passenger side where she gets in. She obviously does not want to be late for school, and you can assume that she has experienced this behavior from her younger brother once or twice or many times before. So the video is interesting to me because it helps to set up this opposition of being gentle, and in this case, in parenting, versus trying to hold the kid to account. And by that is meant accountable to more than just himself. The idea that how can we be gentle with someone as they figure out their own feelings and their own needs, and where's the line when that starts to get in the way of the needs of others? How do you take some time for this one kid who's having some strong emotions about going to school, and then another kid, an older sister, who's having some strong emotions about knowing the consequences of being late for school? Sometimes when we look at problems, we'll tend to make them into an either-or, that we have to choose between either being gentle or holding people responsible for the choices, making sure that they are accountable. We don't need to get into that split here. And again, just to reinforce that I'm not coming out and saying gentle parenting is wrong. I actually respect the approach, because if you do not deal with the capacity of your child to identify their feelings, find words for them, express them, and problem solve when they're younger, we all know the difficulties that can arise downstream later on in life with people who cannot do that emotional processing, who cannot do that self-regulation. And so co-regulating through gentle parenting is a wonderful thing. But let's go back again to that video and the idea of either being gentle or tossing someone in the back of the car, and reread that first verse in today's scripture passage. My friends, this is what Paul is writing. My friends, if anyone is detected in a transgression, if your younger brother is misbehaving, You who have received the Spirit should restore such a one. So she's restoring him back to behavior she thinks is needed. In a spirit of gentleness. Take care that you yourselves are not tempted. Paul is saying we don't choose between gentleness and holding someone to account. You don't have to choose between them. We do them at the same time. Paul is saying to the church in Galatia, and therefore is saying to us, we have a responsibility to look out for one another in this family of God. And looking out includes correcting people, holding them responsible. But that is not a license for us to be marching around and telling people which way is up. It is itself a responsibility to be done gently. And doing it gently means that you help the person bear whatever burden they are carrying, as opposed to grabbing their backpack and throwing it into the back of the seat. Let me talk about society, our culture, for a bit. Because Paul's writing this 2,000 years ago into what we can call a collectivist culture. A culture that already understands that our actions impact the larger community, and so that we prioritize the needs of the many, the collective, over our own needs. Paul's writing into that culture. But in 2,000 years later, in Western culture, we're hearing it in an individualistic culture. We live in a culture where it's all about me. We measure our behaviors in terms of what it is that I need. Yep, come on up here. And you want to do art up here, you are welcome to do so. You are welcome to use that one, Xander. You have been trained in a Western culture to focus on your own needs. Me first, and will let the dominoes fall where they perhaps will fall with the rest of the world. So that's a very quick Reader's Digest version of collectivist society that Paul's writing into, and our individualism ears that are hearing it. This isn't the perfect example of collectivist society, but just to give you a hint that many of you remember what it's like being in a society where it wasn't just about you, the individual. Do you remember back in the day when in the neighborhood all the kids would travel around on their bicycles and you never knew which house they would end up at to go and play? You would see all of their bicycle. If you wanted to find your kid in the neighborhood, you just look out the window or walk around the block and you see where are all the bicycles thrown on someone's yard. When you're at someone else's house, this is by the bikes, this is back in the 80s. For me, it was back in the 70s. But when you're at someone else's house and you misbehave, guess what the rules are? Mom there gets to discipline you. Mom doesn't get on the phone and call up your own parent and say, can you talk to your kid and straighten them out? There was an agreement amongst all the mothers in the collective that if my kid acts out in your presence, you have permission to do the discipline. I don't know if that still happens today, but I can imagine that it doesn't happen as often, that instead we become afraid to collectively call out or straighten out other people. And that we may very well have kids say, you're not the boss of me, you can't tell me what to do. So maybe back in the 70s you have a hint of memory of what a collectivist approach to socializing children was versus what it could be today. So from that perspective, a whole bunch of red flags go up for me when I think about the idea of standing before my congregation and saying, your job is to go out into the community and your job is to tell people how they should behave. I feel very uncomfortable doing that. Again, Paul is writing this teaching 2,000 years ago in a society where people understood how to do so. But we live in a society today where we have people who are walking around as though it's their right to grab their little brother and toss him in the back of a car and drive them away. In fact, we live in a culture where the world is starting to hate Christianity because it believes that all Christianity is some self-given license to walk up to other people and not only tell them how to behave, but to impose upon them what the Christian thinks is the correct behavior. So that creates an issue for us. How do we, as the church, understand what Paul is teaching us? And the very first thing that I would say is, Paul is talking about how you hold one another to account in your own faith community. He's not telling his people, you go out into the world and you point the fingers at them, and if you see someone misbehaving, you call them out. Now, as a minister, I'm reluctant to even say that in a congregation. First off, how many of you really would cooperate if I called you up and said, I'm coming over for a visit. Rick, I'm coming over to your house, and I want to have a conversation with you about your behavior. Rick's a nice guy. He's going to go, yeah, come on over anyway. But the idea that I'm going to call you out and tell you how you should or shouldn't behave, that ship sailed, a couple of decades ago. So the idea that you would do it with one another, that you would accept one another doing it, even if it's done gently, it's a challenge to do. We'll come back to that in a second. A few decades ago, there was a Harvard anthropologist named Jean Briggs, and she wrote this book, Never in Anger, and it documents the discoveries that she made as an anthropologist when studying Inuit parenting. She embedded herself with an Inuit family, and she was amazed to discover the differences in how parenting is done in those communities compared to how it is unfolding in the rest of North American culture. She noticed that she never saw Inuit parents raising their voice and getting upset with their children when their young children acted out. You noticed that instead of raising their voice at them, they would somehow keep their cool. She found that instead it was considered in that culture for if an adult were to get upset and yell to a child, that was considered inappropriate behavior, inappropriate adult behavior. And so she's trying to figure out, how does that work? What's behind it? And one day she just happened upon a mother and a child, and she arrived as the parent was saying to the child, take this stone and throw it at me. And obviously what had happened before she came around the corner was maybe the child was throwing a stone at a sibling or someone else. The parent said, take the stone and throw it at me. And so the child threw the stone at the mom. And what the mom did next was to say, ow. that hurt. From there, the anthropologist was able to piece together that in Inuit culture, instead of yelling at and raising one's voice at children to insist that they should understand abstractly what is right and wrong, that first they have to have modeled to them the feelings that accompany the consequences of behaviors, so that one could understand one's own feelings in relationship to other people's feelings. And that children learn not by having them hear some diatribe about what's right or wrong. They learn by playing. And so that's a way of modeling behavior. They play and they learn. And so parenting in the Inuit culture was about, let's act out the behavior that I want you to get to. Throw the stone at me, and then I will play with you and say, ow, that hurt. And then the play will go from there. She discovered that Inuit parents used stories, fantastic stories, that were pretty straightforward though. If you get too close to the water monster will come out and it will grab you and it will take you off to another family and you'll never see your family again. And when we hear that, we think, oh my gosh, the terror that that might inflict into a child. But the anthropologists observed that it actually allowed the child to have their own framework for understanding consequences, which allowed them to make choices about their behavior. In other words, Inuit parenting accomplished what Paul is teaching. Hold your children to account, but do so in a gentle way. But with that story in mind, rather than the story of Inuit culture and parenting in mind, rather than the opening video that I talked about, let's hear again that first verse from chapter 6. My friends, if anyone is detected in a transgression, you who have received the Spirit should restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness. Only when you are connected with other people can you actually act out with them new ways of behaving. Only when you're connected to other people can you do what the next part of the verse is. Bear their burdens with them. When someone is acting out, when someone is behaving in an inappropriate way, being gentle means that you're actually helping to carry them along. There's no such thing as a drive-by discipline. If you're truly helping someone out, you're carrying whatever burden makes it difficult for them to act in an appropriate way. I don't know if it's possible in 2025 in a congregation, but what Paul isn't saying is, your job is to go out there in the community and you tell them which way is up. You tell them how they should behave. Paul is saying, in a community of faith, when we see someone else who is struggling, we come up alongside them and we carry their burden. In so doing, that's how we help people to grow and mature in their behavior. And continuing with the theme from the other sermons over the summer, when we do that, we shape ourselves in a way that the world out there, as if they're anthropologists, look at us and say, there's something here, something I don't understand, but we would say something spirit-filled that we want to replicate. Amen.